Hello and welcome to the Canadian Condominium Institute podcast presented by the Grand River Chapter. I'm your host, Michelle Dyer. Twice a month, we speak with people from across the condominium industry in Southern Ontario, from condo residents to managers and lawyers, engineers, contractors, and lions and bears. Oh my. No, I'm kidding. We aim to provide the community with tips and insights and resources to better navigate your condominium life. If you like what you're hearing, make sure you subscribe. And if you're not a member of CCI yet, make sure you visit our website, cci-grc.ca, and register today. Thank you to RLV LLP for this awesome podcast studio. And we welcome Miss Sara Hicks.
Hello.
Sarah's the Vice President at MF Property Management, and Sara was born into condominium management.
I was.
Literally.
I was.
Did your mom have you at the office?
Yeah, as a child, I would be stuffing envelopes on a Friday evening and then delivering them.
That was the old school way of doing any kind of notification to condominium owners, right? Like you stuff envelopes and mail them or deliver them to every single unit. Mm-hmm. AGM packages, those big thick envelopes.
Yeah, everything. There was no, email was around, but that wasn't the heavily rotated version of communication. So yeah, it was the packages and the mailings.
So you're three stuffing envelopes, getting paper cuts, crying.
Yeah, seriously.
Did she at least give you ice cream?
I don't remember. I think it was just all right, well, we're just going to run out and drop off these notices. We'd be making a game out of running up the stairs and sort of thing, delivering. And then, so that's where it all started. And I'm still here.
All these years later. Well, welcome. And thank you so much for joining us today. So we're going to talk about partying. Mm-hmm. I know. And people.
Yeah, this is the fun one.
This is the fun one. So we thought that it wouldn't be much of a podcast in the sense of what could you possibly say about partying in condos. However, once you and I started talking, and then once the committee started talking, we're like, okay, wait, this is actually a podcast. There is a lot that can go on in a condominium when you live in the multi-residential world. Right?
Yeah, totally.
So let's talk a little bit about condominium life itself. So you are subject to the people around you.
Yes.
What about noise levels? Can you expect complete silence in a condominium? Because
people 100% expect that or don't anticipate the amount of noise transfer that there is. They, we hear we totally empathize when there's a dog that's barking at all hours. Somebody's cranking their music. Somebody's got the evening news on at the highest level. But, more and more we're hearing even just by taps running, somebody's vacuuming, somebody's having a shower. So the noise transfer at the best of times is not 100% soundproof.
But there's a reasonability.
That's right.
You need to be reasonable in expecting that you are going to hear a vacuum.
Yep.
You're going to hear taps running. You're going to hear water running.
Yep.
Is it acceptable to have a dog barking at 3 a.m. for an hour? No. So that's something you can take care of. That's something you can help with.
That's right.
But for people that are calling to say, I can hear my neighbor walking around at 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah,
you can.
Yeah, there's living noises. And that was really brought forward with COVID when more people were home than ever before. These buildings, they're never really meant, as much as they can have full capacity, they're never really intended for everybody to be at home all at the exact same time. And then brought forward the whole, well, I'm working and so is creating this noise, or well, I'm getting home from my shift and now so is up doing whatever they're doing. And again, when it's something that's, over and beyond what we deem acceptable or reasonable, it's like, oh yeah, we'll keep track of it. We'll deal with it. But when it's someone that's, they are taking their shower at the middle of the night, we can't tell them to not do that. That's right.
I remember specifically one situation where when I was a property manager, an owner was upset because she had bought the unit above the garage door. And the garage door was the most silent garage door that was on the market at the time. Right. We had engineers come in and analyze it because she could swear she could hear the garage door opening and closing. Found out she was sleeping in the spare room instead of the master bedroom, which was off the other way. So the spare room was, literally over top of the garage door. She wanted us, the property management and the board of directors to ask people not to come in the garage after 1 a.m. So you have people, this is before COVID, people working shift work, people working, I mean, you're entitled to go out and come in.
That's right.
And we had to sit her down and say, that's not a reasonable request.
Right.
Right? So, and then because the garage door was making the noise and she could hear it, she wanted a discount in her condo fees.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't work either.
It doesn't. No, it doesn't work. And it's hard because you have to empathize with the people that are, say they're coming from a home where, yeah, it was quiet. Maybe they were in a quiet neighborhood. Maybe they're in a detached home. And why don't you expect to, you know, not hear everything that your neighbor's doing? But at a certain point, you know, when that person is getting ornery because they're hearing children above them, how often can we go to the family above and say, listen, you know, can you stop your baby from crying? Can you just hold down your toddler? He's running too much. Like, that's not reasonable either, right? So it's just like, I feel bad that, you know, somebody can't sleep because they're hearing these noises. But on the other hand, we can't tell someone with a family or what have you, you got to tone it down with the children playing. Yeah. There, again, it's a very fine line. Yeah.
And especially now, like, let's fast forward through COVID. COVID was a challenge because you're right. Everybody was home at the same time. So, you know, I could empathize with the nurse who had just worked 3 days straight and needed sleep, but yet she's hearing children running around and people showering and people out and about and meandering around the hallways and trying to live a life in inclusion and yet get outside and be away from this, you know, little space, right? You don't realize how little your condo is until you're forced to stay in it.
That's right.
For a number of months, right? So I can empathize with all that. So let's fast forward through COVID to now. More and more condos are being purchased because we need them.
That's what people can afford as well.
That's right. From a real estate perspective, there is no way that your kids or mine are going to be able to afford a house right now. Right. There's just no way.
Right.
And like even if they're making, it's a crazy market. Even if they're making $150,000 a year in a combined relationship, it's a struggle to get to buy a house.
That's right. And so what we're finding is, you know, 10, 15 years ago, people would buy into the condo community. They believed in the documents, they believed in the rules. It was important to them that, you know, they were all uniform and these rules were in place, what have you. They would kind of choose which condo community they wanted. Yeah. Now it's, you know, oh, this condo comes on the market, it's in my budget, done. And you know, maybe there's a fight just to get that one unit. Yeah. They're not they want a home. They want somewhere to live. They're not necessarily
something to call their own.
That's right. They're not necessarily shopping for which condo community is right for them. And so, you know, they move in and suddenly it's like, wait, I bought a condo? Seriously, some people don't even, you know, or, well, what do you mean that I'm responsible for this? I thought it was a condo. I thought they're all the same. Yeah. Or what do you mean I can't do what I want? And it's like, oh boy, like, and then that's where, you know, as the manager, we feel like the bad guy, you know, telling them that here's your brand new spanking home. You scrounge and save to buy it because, you know, they're not cheap either. Nope. And then suddenly you're not allowed to do all these things that you anticipated to do. Yeah. And so again, it's kind of shifted where there's people that they're only in condos because they kind of have to be. Yeah. Yeah. Right?
Yeah. And that is, I'm going to throw the lawyers and the real estate agents under the bus. I am, because, you know, I get it. I get that you want your client to get that home they're looking for. But if you let them just arbitrarily purchase whatever is there without sitting them down and saying, okay, this is what you need to know. That 80-pound dog you have can't come. Right. Those two cars you have, one can't come. Right. Like, you need to know what you're getting into before you sign on the dotted line. And I think sometimes that lawyers and real estate agents are doing their job and trying to get people into their homes and trying to do all these things without really sitting down and looking at their clients and going, right, is this the community for you? I'm not saying all agents do that. I'm not saying all lawyers do that, but it's sitting them down and going, okay, I get that you can afford this, but
Yeah.
you need to understand what you're getting yourself into.
That's right. And I've seen articles online that are, and again, that's right. I'm not going to paint all real estate agents
No.
with the same brush. There's some that are very familiar with condos and they'll
Yes.
highlight those important things to their clients. But, you know, I do see sometimes real estate agent articles that are condo based. I'm like, okay, like what do they have to say? And it's like, you know, top 5 things to look for when you're buying a condo. And
Yeah.
it's like, what does the lobby look like? How many coffee shops are nearby? How close is the blah, blah? And you're like, okay, like that is a portion of it. But to me, how much money do they have in the reserve fund? And no,
Yeah.
that's not fun and whatever. And I know, you know, some people, it's the amenities or whatever. That's a portion of it. But then they're completely blatantly oblivious to the fact that, you know, they can't have a big dog. They can't park their 3 cars
Yeah.
or 2 cars, whatever.
Yeah.
They can't just rent, like all these things that are critical. Like
Yes.
someone moves in with too many cars. That is a huge, what a headache for I feel bad often for them, even though, you know, sometimes it's like, well, you should have known better. But I know that I've bought a house. I know that all the paperwork, and do we read everything? Like, you know what I mean? Like when we buy our house,
True.
do we
No,
read
I didn't
every single word
No.
that it says, right?
No.
Like we pay the lawyer to bring things to our attention. You hope the real estate agent brings things to your attention,
Yeah.
right? So it's just like, I understand that you're not going to find every little thing until it impacts you.
Yeah. Until it's,
And then it's like, uh-oh, what does my insurance actually say? Like that kind of thing.
But my favorite is when it's great that you're looking at the lobby, and it's great that you're looking at from a picturesque point of view, and how many
where do I
want to
live in a city?
and
sure.
all that neighborhood, you know, stuff. And oh, look, it does have a gym, and oh, look, it does have a terrace, and oh, look, it's got a little kitchenette and a party room and all that stuff.
Yeah, but
You know, people have to pay for that.
That's right.
And I think that this is where it also gets a little bit confusing. You know, the condo fees you pay pays for all of that. That doesn't mean you get to run rickshaw all over it. It just means that a portion of your condo fees are going to that amenity room, or a portion of the condo fees are going to saving up money to redo that elevator in 30 years down the road.
Right.
And yes, you have to pay for it now. That's the law.
Right.
Like,
it's like
you don't have a choice.
No, you're legally obligated when you purchased. And, you know, because we have all things coming back of, oh, I didn't know that or this or that. It's like, but you have to remember when you purchased, you signed on to the fact that you are not going to hang your bed sheets in the windows, right? Like they can't, like
the salami on the balcony. Remember that? There was the guy who was drying his salami on a balcony, not even all these salamis all over the balcony. And we're like, oh, you can't do that.
Right. And it's not because I have something against salami, really, like morally, ethically. It's the fact that the rules say you can't.
You can't dry salami on a balcony.
It's not my opinion. It's just what it is. It's what you agreed to, and people don't.
And no, even if you give me one, I can't let you dry the salami on the balcony.
Yeah, I can't be bribed by salami.
But it's true. It's the bed sheets. It's the cardboard. It's stuff that you just you just can't do. And investors, you rent out your units. That student cannot put that flag in that window,
right? Whether
you gave him permission or not, right? Like, and that's where it gets a little dicey.
Yes, and with the parties too.
Well, this is where I'm going
right
now.
Because and as we said, all condos are different. They're not one size fits all, and we've noticed there's a level of expectation with freedom, especially in the townhomes or the lot lines.
Yes.
Well, I have my own house. It's almost like when you say condo, a lot of people think building.
A building, yeah.
They automatically picture a building.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, maybe, you know, in the GTA, most of them probably are, but that's not so much around here.
That's right.
It's different in these smaller areas. And so they think, well, I have my own backyard.
Yeah.
Why can't I just put in a hot tub? It's my backyard. It's like, well, it's more complicated than that. Or like with the party, I forget which condo it was, but they were having a party and they were going to have a lot of guests. Like they're like, this could be 20, 30, 40 cars. We don't know. It's like, oh, well, you know,
Where would you like to park them?
You just have one driveway. And they're like, well, there's a whole laneway. And it's like, oh boy.
No. Yeah.
Right? It's just like, oh, that's not just the street parking. It's like, that's a fire route.
Yeah.
They didn't like that. So.
And that's where it gets, just on the townhouse condos, I'll never forget, I got a phone call from a person who has long since sold their townhouse condo, who was so furious and upset with me because MF Property Management, the company I worked for before, as you know, was taking out something like money, taking out money out of her account. Oh. What are you doing taking money out of my account? I'm like, those are your condo fees. I didn't buy a condo. I bought a house.
Jeez.
I said, you bought a townhouse in a condominium complex. This isn't a condo, it's a house. Because that apartment versus townhouse wasn't cutting through.
Right.
So she had to call her lawyer. She called her lawyer and everything. And the lawyer's like, sorry. I'm like, did you not go and see it? And she did. She saw it. She literally thought it was a freehold townhouse. She had no idea it was a condo. And she called me back screaming at me about it. And I'm like, you kind of need to talk to your lawyer on that one, because your lawyer should have told you this was a condo. Yeah, well, my lawyer was from Toronto. Oh. Well, that is now a discussion you need to have with the lawyer, because
you're in it now.
Yeah. At the end of the day. Anyway, I think very quickly she sold. She didn't realize she was in a. Oh my gosh. But it's the same thing, right? Yeah. You're in that laneway that you're driving through is not a parking lot for your 50 guests that are coming in. Yeah. And some of them, even some of where I could think specifically in Guelph, Kitchener-Waterloo, a lot of the townhouse complexes are off of streets that don't allow street parking. Right. Right? Like they're the busy thoroughfares. So you can't even put the 40 cars outside the complex along the street. So. Right. What do you suggest they do then?
Yeah, that was a tough one. That's when we were like, how do you have so many friends? No, that's a lot of people. Well, at that point, we just said it. And in that area, like I think they were off Victoria in Guelph. There wasn't any other options. It was like, if you want to chat with your neighbors, they had really long driveways. Yep. Maybe your neighbors would allow some of your guests to park there, but that's not up to us to arrange, right? Yeah. And they were really upset because, again, they thought, well, the roadway. And it's like, you can do that, but then the tickets and the towing might come down the pipe on you guys.
Wow. And fire route, and if it's if somebody complains enough, the fire department will come out and they'll start fining. Like, it's not just by law that's going to do that. The condo's going to get a fine from the fire department, right? That in turn will come to you at thousands of dollars, right? Yeah. I do remember one, again, along Victoria, doing the same thing. We had about 20 guests, and I said, your best option is to call one of the golf courses, see if they'll let you park the cars there, and rent a little bus. And just drive people back and forth. And that's what they did. Great. They just drove people back and forth.
Yeah, just a little shuttle bus.
That's exactly what they did, because it was better for them to do that than take a risk, right? Yep. But so let's talk about some of the things that we'll stick to townhouses, because buildings get a little bit more convoluted and complicated. There's more in a building. So let's talk parties in townhouse complexes. So we know summer's coming and you can have a barbecue with your family, and parking is definitely one of the things. Let's talk about the noise levels now. Yeah. In a townhouse complex. So there's still going to be noise. You still have neighbors to attend to. Any suggestions or recommendations? What should owners do to let their neighbors know that this is happening?
Yeah, it's funny because every community is different. There's some that are very close-knit where everybody knows everybody. They know the names of their neighbors. They probably, right? It's the person that's not invited.
That's going to be the problem.
Yeah, they'll be the problem. Yeah,
you'll get that email on Monday.
Exactly. But not all of them are like that. Some of them don't even know who lives next door. Or sometimes, not all the times, but sometimes when it's tenants or it's students, they mind their own, they don't go out and talk with all their neighbors. They kind of do their own thing. I mean, we've seen cases where they've given neighbors a heads up to say, listen, we're going to have a few extra people, whatever. And they work that out on their own. Again, as property managers, we try not to get between these. Because imagine getting involved in every little like event, you know,
Yeah,
it's
no.
just, no, that's way too much. I mean, that's the polite thing to do, to give the heads up and then follow, you know, the noise within noise bylaws. Like, you know, if it's past 11, bring it inside, especially if you're in the backyard, kind of going on and on. It's just the general respect. Remember, you're in close quarters. You know, you're not
they can
out.
hear you.
You're not out in the country. You could hear you. And then, you know, if it's a once in a while thing, I'd say generally people are okay with it.
Yeah.
You know, if it's like, oh yeah, like whatever, once in a while.
Yeah.
It's when it's the repeated
That's
parties or it's the weeknight parties,
Oh,
things like that then it's like, okay, this is kind of crossing the line. And this would happen in a typical residential neighborhood too, right?
Yeah,
like where people
exactly.
get frustrated.
I would hedge a bet that the townhouses that we used to manage, or I used to manage, a lot of them were student driven.
Yeah.
So it would be those weekday parties. And I remember coming into a slew of phone calls because some student had a massive, to the point that like
too far.
they were swinging around balconies. It was crazy. Like this was in a townhouse and they had the walkouts at the bottom.
Yes.
And then the balconies, you know, people's they were swinging from one balcony to the other.
Oh,
like,
dear.
so can you imagine looking out your balcony door and you're seeing
like,
somebody swing on you, get off my balcony, like woo, creepy, right?
Right.
Passed out on the dry in the roadway.
Yes.
People lying on the ground, just sleeping. Pillows. Actual pillows on the ground. Not even a joke. They thought this was the funniest thing in the world. The interesting thing is when I called the owner, off-site owner, the student that lived there was her daughter.
Yes.
And no way could her daughter have done this.
Right.
You've got the wrong unit. Thank goodness I had pictures, and there were lots of there were so many owners that emailed and called. So many. Yeah. That every board member, all 5 of them, called and emailed.
Did people call the police at the time?
Nobody did.
That's shocking.
That's what surprised me most of all. Is I'm like, and I remember sitting at the AGM saying, I don't understand why no one called the police, and they all looked at me like I was crazy. I'm like,
they think to call the PM first almost
at
sometimes.
midnight.
Right.
Because I'm going to answer my phone. I'm going to answer my office phone at midnight. If I'm answering my office phone at midnight, I need a life, and everybody needs to tell me to go home. Like, seriously, they're all calling me midnight. I'm like, why wouldn't you call the police? Nobody called the police.
Interesting.
And then after that, second party number 2, they did, because they got an earful from me saying, like, nothing wrong with calling the police in bylaw and going, okay, this is insane.
Yeah, and Guelph noise bylaw will come out.
Yeah, exactly.
And they will fine, and it's not cheap, right? Like, it's meant to be a deterrent.
Yeah.
And that's what I've told people with the repeated parties, too. It's like, well, call bylaw. And then I'll contact the owner and let them know that this is ongoing. Because I had one, too, where I drove by the next day, and they were the casings of fireworks on the roof. Yeah. And you could see where they just came out of the window and sat on the roof, and they did their fireworks.
Yeah, I had that.
And there was a whole bunch of stuff that happened. There was
beer cans
people
everywhere.
peeing like in the window wells and like things like that. And they were taking pictures. I'm like, maybe don't take pictures of that. I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, by the way, I don't want to see the naked guys.
I don't need that in my email. I'll just delete that. Pretend I didn't see it. But yeah, it's amazing how people...
Yeah, beer cans all over the site.
Yeah, where it's just like, that's too far. And again, it's not always the tenant. It could be it's their friends and their friends' friends. And it just gets out of hand.
Out of control.
Exactly.
She didn't have any...
Exactly.
But the funny part was that she did deny it to her mother.
Oh.
And the mother called back and said, oh, no, that wasn't her. She said she was home in bed, or she was home studying and sleeping in bed. I'm like, okay, I didn't want to do this, but send.
Here's the receipts.
And she's like, oh, boy. The daughter got in a lot of trouble. But it's not the first time we've seen these townhouses. And other parties that people have to understand is... any kind of like traditions or religious, religious traditions as well. Like there are some religions that, do certain things with slaughtering animals, and that's a full on, thing to do. However, in a townhouse complex, you can't do that.
Yeah, we've had it with the tent. I forget which holiday it was, but it meant erecting a tent and having family over and whatever. Yeah. And if we knew about it, then, because, you know, you hear from people and they're like, there's this party going on and they have a tent and music and blah. And we didn't know what it was. And they didn't think to let us know in advance, oh, yeah, we're going to be having this thing. Because it probably would have been fine. Like, it's kind of, for the tent, that was fine.
Yeah.
But we didn't know quite how to handle it until we contacted the owners. Like, oh, we're actually having this religious celebration.
Right.
We have to have the tent up for this many days. And it was like, it's fine. Like, as long as you're not breaking the noise bylaws, that was fine.
Yeah. That sort of thing is fine. But I remember an incident where they were celebrating Eid. And I guess they do, there's a chicken, and there's a way that they have to slaughter the chicken and cook the chicken so that it follows the religious guidelines. And they were doing what they do, and they were doing it on the balcony of the home. And, of course, people around were very upset.
Yeah.
Right? And not understanding, and that is a lack of understanding. But having said that, you also can't. There are lines that need to be drawn on that, right? So those kind of parties, you know, you want to make sure that people know that you're having them, that it's a religious thing, and that there's so many things that you need to do. And if even if them letting you know, the property manager know that this is what's going on in case anybody complains, maybe they're not comfortable going to their neighbors, but if anybody complains, this is what we're doing, at least you have an explanation.
You have a heads up.
You have a heads up. You can let the board know, and the board, you know, if they're a close-knit community, they can let other people know as well.
Because people are always watching. I don't know.
Creepy,
you think things.
You're
not. You're always under some sort of surveillance. Whether you know, on the one side, it could be good. Some people feel more secure. They always know there's somebody, you know, keeping an eye out. If they're away, maybe like there's somebody. But then on the other hand, it's just like, if you're in your backyard, chances are
somebody can hear you. So don't talk about your neighbors.
Exactly.
Because they'll hear you.
Yeah. Or you might be doing something that you might think is very innocent and benign. You're having a barbecue or you're smoking a cigar, but that might bug somebody.
That's it.
Right?
Oh, I forgot about the smoking thing too. Yeah, cigar or even marijuana now where it's legal and you can do that, and people,
Right.
Let's move over to the buildings, because that can be, as I do my building form there.
Square.
This is a little bit more complicated. So let's just start with, so we're going to talk about the party rooms, and there's some more complications with that if you want to have an event in a party room or on a common terrace or a common area where gardens maybe or whatever. But let's just talk about the individual. So you live in a condominium, you live on the second floor, and you want to have a few people over. Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, so during COVID, things were shuttered, right? So like the amenities were closed, party rooms most of them were shut down. The boards opted to shut them down. We advised them to shut them down. There were a few that didn't, and then there were outbreaks at some, right? Yeah. So it's like we kind of covered ourselves and said, listen, let's do what we can to reduce the spread. And they're opening up again, which, you know, it's good. People are paying, and that was the thing. People were paying for amenities that were shut down. And it was unfortunate, but unfortunately
But you still have to, you're still paying the heat and the hydro in that amenity room.
That's right.
You know, the equipment's still there. You're still having somebody come in and clean them, even though
that's right.
No one's using it. You still have to have that clean, right?
Yeah, and we didn't know when they would be able to be. Things were so back and forth.
Oh, I know.
It's like, well, it might be next week that we can reopen. Like, we really didn't know. We had to just follow the guidelines. So they're opening back up again, which is great. But yeah, that does invite, okay, well, now what does this mean? You know, are you renting the party room? Are you having a bunch of people to your unit? Are they going to be on the balcony? All these sorts of things. And things come from all of it.
Yeah. That's
not to be like a wet towel, but like.
But things do come from all of it. So let's talk about the units. So I have 10 people over and 5 are on my balcony smoking.
Yeah.
Guess what?
Yeah.
You're getting a call. Like, as a property manager, you're getting a call from the unit above, the unit below, and the 2 beside you. The music's cranked. You're getting a call. Now, you could do the same thing that you would in a townhouse and just knock on the door, put a little note under, hey, I'm having a few people over. If the noise is too much for you, let me know. We'll tone it down.
Yeah.
It's the ones that don't.
Yes.
Then it's the ones that were not your fault, not the host's fault, but someone decides that it'd be a really good idea to vomit over the balcony, right?
Yeah.
Like, throw a cigarette butt over the balcony.
Yes.
this is where now more violation in a whole different manner
Yeah.
becomes a problem.
Right, because we're not even necessarily always talking about condo owners or residents.
That's right.
It's their guests.
That's right.
We have no idea who they are.
Right.
Right? Like it's like, or sometimes, with the butts, you don't always know where they're coming from. People are flicking them, and we've had mulch catch on fire.
Yeah, whatever you do, it doesn't matter if you're partying or not. Do not throw your cigarette butts over, or your little end of your marijuana. Don't throw it.
Don't throw the butts. Never mind the littering, but the fire potential.
Yeah.
And I know that's very frustrating to people that live there. And we actually had, I don't want to laugh, but it's just people are trying to come up with solutions.
Yeah.
He actually went out and he was collecting the butts and looking at the brands. And was
trying
knocking
to
on doors,
figure out whose they were,
asking people, well, what brand of cigarette do you smoke? And he was handing out ashtrays. And I get the proactive approach, but he kind of thought first that we should do that. And it's like, okay, we're not going to go. We don't, firstly, we really, unfortunately, don't have the time to interrogate people about their favorite brand of cigarette.
But you still can't. You can't. That's
so
a privacy thing too, whether you believe it or not. The product that they use is none of your business.
No.
Right.
And there's again, if you're having guests, maybe it's it's a boyfriend, girlfriend that just visit. Again, there's too many factors. We can just remind people, listen, can you please
make sure you have somewhere to dispose of the butts. And if you're going to throw up, make sure they have a garbage bin close by.
It's not because we're party poopers.
No.
We have so many other things that we would rather do. It's just, it bothers people. And I understand. It starts to look dumpy. Or, if you have barf or whatever down below, like it's gross.
Well, and then, the person in the balcony below is getting, that's awful. And I, how many times did we see that over the years, right? Like it doesn't always go as far as you want it to.
No.
Not to mention some crazy other things that people were doing off the balcony. So that's your party in your unit. So again, the noise, keep the noise down. And then there's the reasonability, right?
Yes.
Like if you're going to have a few people over and you're playing cards and you're having glasses of wine, it's reasonable to think that people above you and beside you are going to hear you talking.
Yeah.
And the people beside you and underneath and above you need to understand that you are allowed to have your mom and dad over to play cards, right?
That's right. And not all buildings are equal in terms of sound transfer, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like there's some that are more wooden in structure.
Yeah.
And those, honestly, the echoes, the reverberations, not even from parties, but from just day-to-day living noises.
Vacuum.
And someone will say, oh, well, I lived in a condo before. I lived in a building before, and I didn't hear this. And it's like, well, unfortunately, maybe there was more concrete. Maybe there's whatever, more brick, whatever, that it wasn't such an aggressive. So then they start to think, well, it's this person, and they're doing it on purpose, or you need to get them to stop. And then that's where it gets tricky for us.
Yeah.
When it's like literally structurally, maybe the building is just
not suited for that sound.
Yeah.
Then there's the parking. So in a lot of buildings, less and less we're seeing less and less visitor parking. But in some of the older buildings, there's a lot of visitor parking. So, potentially if you had 20 people in your unit, you could take up all of the visitor parking spaces, and there'd be no way that your mom who's coming to babysit your kid can find a parking space, right? So there's that. And most buildings, I understand, still have the visitor parking tags. So, that's where bylaw again can come in and start ticketing those ones without tags.
That's right.
I actually had a resident at one of the buildings start to knock on doors asking if they can borrow the visitor parking spaces for the 5 or 6 guests that she was gonna. She knew enough of them. She got it.
Wow.
Yeah. For the 5 or 6 guests she were having to for a dinner party or whatever. So I mean that is reasonable. You're having a dinner party, okay, 5 people, you ask your neighbors, okay, they help you out and you've got a visit. But if you're having, 20 people coming in, 30 people, like that's crazy.
Yeah.
So let's talk about the party rooms, because there is a lot more involved that people I don't think realize.
No. There's potential for that. And again, most people, you chat with them, they're just having a baby shower, they're having a little thing, whatever, and they'll be in and out and it'll be fine. But we've been burned before. Condos have been burned before when they haven't properly covered themselves. And so that's why now the waiver.
There's the waiver.
Or the deposit.
Yes. Yeah. Well, the deposit's a big thing.
Yes.
A lot of just when I left, there was a couple of condominiums. We were in COVID, but there was a couple of condominiums that they had the deposit, and you got your deposit back. If you didn't clean up, you didn't. And I remember one where, holy moly, like they thought they cleaned.
Oh dear.
And it was a birthday party for a little one. Well, the little one wrote all over the wall with a crayon.
Oh no.
And they didn't clean it. Then they had whatever cake or whatever they had. The little one had it all over her and had it all in the carpet.
Oh shoot.
Like, and they're like, well, you know, we can clean. We're like, no, we keep the deposit and we clean. Well, no, we're going to clean it. No, it doesn't work that way. Now we have to clean it to the satisfaction. We have to hire somebody. And they were not pleased that they didn't get their deposit back. It cost a fortune. Like, the cleaner had to come in with a super duper enzyme to pull the whatever was in that carpet. And it was that thick, you know, that thick icing, you know, that
like
colored
fondant.
Yeah, and
icing.
that colored icing that you get that's really like almost plasticky.
Yeah.
It was all black, green, like just buried in the gray carpet. Like, and then the coloring all over the walls. There was the bathroom sink was off of its thing, and there's we didn't do that. Okay, well, there's only one bathroom and you had 25 people. Who did that? Like,
that's wilder than a college party.
Right? So yeah, it was a strange, and they were so upset they didn't get their deposit back. But we had the waiver.
It's important.
We had pictures, and we did what we had to do on our side so that the condo corporation or everybody doesn't have to pay.
That's right.
To have that cleaned up. The waiver also works not only on the cleaning side, but there's also the alcohol aspect.
Yeah, that's tricky.
So let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, the alcohol's tricky because, you know, you always worry that if there's an event and alcohol is served and somebody drives home that shouldn't have been driving, then what? You know, is the condo going to be named, sued, what have you? The board, the manager, like who's all going to be liable for this? So, I mean, every condo is different. And I mean, some people might sneak in alcohol anyways, even if they're not permitted.
Yeah.
But again, our waivers try to cover all of that.
You have to.
Just in case.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember people baby shower and they're like, well, we're not going to have any alcohol. And I'm like, listen, my baby shower had mimosas. So I get how that goes. You're like, no. You're still signing this waiver if you want the room. Like,
right. The waivers. Yeah. And we had one where an owner had passed away and the daughter wanted to have a celebration of life in the building for her, but the daughter wasn't an owner.
Oh.
And so
how do you do that?
Yeah, so she was still technically, you know, power of attorney, and this was months after. And so she's like, I don't know if we're still going to own the unit by then though, but we want to have it in the building because.
But how do you do that? Because
I know. And so it was like, well, how does that work? Because we, like, you know, the condo's powers kind of stop when somebody's not an owner anymore, right? Like it sticks with the unit.
Yes.
So it's like, I doubt this celebration of life is going to get rowdy, but I mean, you just don't know what might come from it.
But you
and so we're know. Like, and typically the condo's policy was not to rent the room to anybody that wasn't an owner.
Correct.
And so she was like, well, technically I'm still, but I don't know if I'm still going to be. And we're like, you know, like once you have a better idea, let us know. But if you've sold, unfortunately, we don't think that. We'll be renting the room. I think her idea was to bring forward the people in the building, which I get. And you don't want to be that person, but you always think of the what ifs.
Yeah, but
right?
But if her mom was close to somebody in the building that's a resident, then that resident could have rented out the room and taken on the liability and the responsibility. If it wasn't going to, it would have been easier. That comes down to some condominiums trying to make an extra buck, wanting to help ends meet with some of these party rooms. Have brought forth that suggestion. Well, why don't we open it up and rent it to whomever? And I'm like, oh,
that's a can of worms. Yeah.
No. And then I had one. They have a beautiful clubhouse, and they thought about it for years.
Sure.
You know, what if we rented it out to anybody? And it's like, no, you do just. The liability is so great, and there's been case law that's precedent to show you that, like. There's cases where people have gone home, got in their cars, drove, got into an accident, and were charged. And the people that had the party were charged. Yeah. Even though they went home safely and got home safely and they decided to go back out. Like, you can't take on that liability or that responsibility as a condominium corporation or as a board of directors or as a property manager, because you'd be named. Right. Like,
right. And we've noticed there were some condos that before COVID, they had their party rooms unlocked. So some of them were just, go in, and people would hang out or study or whatever. Yep. And then, then they were locked during COVID. And then some of them are like, you know what, this whole lock thing or fob thing is a good idea to keep track of who the heck's even going in here. Because, there were instances, one of mine, where there was a bathroom and a sauna, whatever, attached to the party room. And it used to be kind of a free-for-all. Like, it was kind of like, all right, you write your name on a calendar if you're going to go in, but people wouldn't.
Yeah.
Well, then suddenly it was like, well, then the toilet paper's always gone.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
Somebody and then here's the condo buying toilet paper for whoever. And initially the bathroom was kind of used if, you had a guest or something like that wanted to go down there or shower or whatever. But then, somebody took advantage of it, and we had to kind of back up on that. And then another time there was a party, and, things were dirty, left messy, whatever, what have you. So it was like, shoot. And then, people, well, why is the door locked? We all pay for it. Yes. We should be able to. And it's just like, you know what? It's not a big deal for you to just let us know this is when you want to use it, what have you, and then you can go down. Yeah. But unfortunately, it was costing you money, not just, when you say the condo, people are like, that's some weird entity in the sky. It's like, no, the condo is actually, that's you.
True, that's true.
Or sometimes I'll say your neighbors.
That's right.
Right? Rather than just the homeowners. Like, try to put it into terms where it's just like, oh, yeah, like that is me. That's is my friends. Yeah. It's not just this hypothetical, right? Because people, and again, like, I have to think of, if I was in their shoes, I wouldn't necessarily know what that means when you talk about things costing the condo money. Doesn't the condo have endless money? Just a big pool.
Sure they do. As long as you keep paying those fees, they could have endless money. Yeah. I remember one very similar, and the gym was open all the time, free for all, no fob, no nothing. You could just go in when you wanted. No cameras, no anything. Same with the party room, and same thing. The party room got destroyed one night. Popcorn everywhere. And somebody was watching a movie on the big screen, for sure. But popcorn spilled everywhere. Nobody knew who it was because nobody signed up on the little sign-up sheet. No one called me in because that's what they were supposed to do. Yeah. It wasn't locked. It was kept open because same sort of attitude that, oh, well, we pay for it, we want to use it. Sure. Same with the gym. Until the gym, somebody came in with a marker and I don't know, it looked like a baseball bat. There were holes in the wall. Marker drawn of very inappropriate pictures. Our name all over it, MF all over it, and the board's name, like the board of directors suck, and just just nasty. And that was the day that the condo
they drew the line. Yeah.
And that it worked out really well, because when you fob something like that, you can have it that it's open. Like, so they opened the gym. This is before COVID, clearly. Open the gym between this time and this time, and you had to fob in to use it. If you work shift work, we would just program your fob to work overnight.
Perfect. Yep.
And then your fob didn't work. So there were certain fobs that, people would request access at certain times, and that's what we would do. So you would have this on your fob. So every time somebody swiped in, we knew exactly who walked in that door when they walked in there. Yep. And then the board said, okay, cameras. We need cameras at the doors. We need cameras in the party room. Same worked for the party room. No more just, they had a fob on it. And I can't remember. I think they did you were able to use it between 6 p.m. and 9 p.m. or something during the week. Like, it was very kind of defined. And then if you had a party, we would just open it up, make sure it worked, the fob worked, and that's what we did. And it was all attached to your units.
Yeah, technology's helped, because again, you can't say no parties ever. Like, it's not reasonable. But we've had ones where, people have had parties and then their guests or whatever have stolen, like in a building. Yeah. They'll go through and they'll steal things from the lobby. Yeah. Oh, or they'll prop the doors open and whatever, and everyone's like, wasn't me. Yeah. And then you're able to be like, well, actually, you had the party because we saw everybody on the camera.
That's right.
Coming through, we saw so-and-so stealing something. Yeah. And usually when you put it in terms of costs, it's like, oh yeah, this actually isn't
so
good.
We had weight stolen from the weight room. We had a Bosu. Like, who wants fine, whatever. You want the Bosu that bad, you can't afford the $50, steal it. Like, crazy stuff that you can't, you can't do that.
No.
And if you know, you're the last fob to enter, and I see that bosu walking out with whoever you brought in with you, guess what? Like, so be it. But we had one where somebody fobbed in, and then somebody walked in after them.
Oh.
So we didn't know who that secondary was.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? Because they didn't fob in, so we had no idea. So then we had to write this whole rule about do not let somebody up. Make sure everybody fobs in. Like, because people take advantage when they can.
Well, and
right?
it just takes one. Like, I like to tell people, like, I know you might feel like I'm picking on you, but I'm not going to tell you about all the other things I'm following up upon because I can't. But it's just like we're just doing our job. Somebody took it the wrong way. It's like why your coffee says caution hot. Because guess what?
Because
someone scalded themselves and sued for millions.
That's
so
right. And won.
And won. And it happened again. So it's just like it only takes one, and then suddenly you have to step back and be like, oh shoot. So how do we protect ourselves if this happens again?
That's it.
And so that's where the waiver comes into play, especially with the rooms.
And especially, and I can't say it enough, especially with the alcohol.
Yeah.
You always want to make sure that everybody's covered because, again, you don't know who's sneaking what in. You don't know who's going to get in their car, and you are liable. At the condominium corporation, the people that, you know, permitted you to be in that room, the board, the property manager, who's ever involved, are like that waiver is second to none when it comes to that
So
stuff.
we're actually glad to see the locked rooms because just, again, it's not the control because of power trip or the board wants to keep people out.
Why do you care?
The
board doesn't care either.
They
Nobody
don't
cares
care
who's in that room. They just want some kind of governance to ensure that everybody's ass is covered.
Because if suddenly then the expenses of the condo are going up, which is what you see when there's vandalism, doors being broken. Those are so expensive. You know,
can you imagine the fees for a law case?
Right.
If somebody went and drinks and drives and gets into an accident and hurts themselves or somebody else.
Yeah. So it's just like, you know what? We're actually thinking about saving you money. It's not because we're power tripping and we want to select who gets to use the room. It's like, I don't care.
Because you have time for that.
Yeah, I don't care. I don't care what your party is. As long as people aren't bothered, have fun. Like, please have fun. We're not here to shut down the fun times, even though that's what it feels like sometimes.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining today. That was a lot of fun, a great conversation. And thank you for listening to another episode of the Canadian Condominium Institute, aka the CCI podcast, presented by the Grand River chapter. My name is Michelle Dyer, and this podcast is available across all major podcast platforms, including Buzzsprout, Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube at CCI Grand River chapter. Until next time.